Canada won't bow down to a bully. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Trump wants us to lose our cool.
The current trade dispute between Canada and the United States has intensified significantly, with the two nations failing to reach a new trade agreement and the U.S. subsequently imposing a new and more aggressive set of tariffs on Canadian goods. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This escalating conflict has solidified a remarkably unified and resolute stance from Canadian officials, business leaders, and the public, that Canada will not, under any circumstances, accept a deal that is detrimental to its long-term economic well-being and the stability of its workforce. This principled position is a testament to the belief that the long-term benefits of a fair and equitable agreement are worth the short-term pain of a trade impasse. The actions and rhetoric from both sides suggest a growing rift in what was once a highly stable and prosperous bilateral relationship. Canada's unwavering resolve. A principled stand on trade. In a pivotal interview with Radio Canada, Canadian Minister Dominic LeBlanc provided a clear and unwavering articulation of the government's position. He stated, without equivocation, that the government's primary goal is not simply to sign an agreement, but to secure a deal that is genuinely beneficial for Canadian workers, supports key industries, and strengthens the national economy. As of the recent deadline, LeBlanc noted that a viable and mutually acceptable agreement had simply not materialized. This stance has garnered powerful and widespread support throughout Canada. Key organizations, including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the United Steelworkers Union, have vocally backed the government's refusal to be rushed into a bad deal. Their shared conviction is encapsulated in the phrase, "No deal is better than a bad deal," a philosophy grounded in the belief that a hastily concluded and flawed agreement would cause more severe and permanent economic harm than the current period of instability. The consensus is that taking the necessary time to negotiate a durable and well-crafted agreement will ultimately yield far more positive and lasting results for Canada's future generations. Despite the highly charged atmosphere, Minister LeBlanc did offer a degree of guarded optimism. He pointed out that the U.S. has not completely shut the door on negotiations and remains open to continued dialogue. He specifically mentioned his anticipation of a conversation with his American counterpart, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, in the coming days, a signal that diplomatic channels, while strained, are still active. This stands in stark contrast to the perspective provided by an anonymous White House official to CBC News. This official's account suggested that Canada had repeatedly demonstrated a lack of seriousness in the negotiations, particularly in its unwillingness to dismantle existing trade barriers. This fundamental difference in perspective highlights the deep-seated and likely difficult-to-resolve disagreements that are at the heart of the current trade conflict. Escalation of tariffs and Canada's unified response. The trade dispute took a dramatic turn when U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order that significantly escalated existing tariffs. This new order imposed a substantial 35% tariff on Canadian products that do not comply with the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, a significant increase that will impact a wide range of goods. Additionally, the order levied a 25% tariff on the non-U.S. portion of assembled vehicles, a direct and damaging move against the highly integrated and interdependent North American automotive supply chain. The U.S. also maintained its blanket 50% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports, a policy that has been a major source of economic hardship and a central point of contention for Canadian producers. The justifications offered by the White House for these tariffs, which often cited cross-border fentanyl trafficking, have been widely dismissed in Canada as a pretext for protectionist trade policies. This has further fueled the perception that the U.S. is not acting in good faith. The imposition of these new tariffs has been met with a strong and unified backlash from Canadian political and business leaders. Dan Kelly, the president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, CFIB, was particularly outspoken in his criticism, labeling the tariffs and their purported rationale as ridiculous and warning that the measures would cause severe damage to small and medium-sized enterprises on both sides of the border. Provincial leaders also reacted with firm resolve. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called the tariff increase concerning and urged the federal government to respond with a proportional and reciprocal 50% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum, arguing that Canada must stand our ground and not capitulate to American pressure. In a similar show of defiance, Quebec Premier François Legault condemned the U.S. action as disappointing and used the moment to stress the critical need for Quebec to diversify its markets and enhance its economic autonomy. This powerful, unified response from across the Canadian political and economic spectrum demonstrates the shared national resolve to protect Canada's interests from what is widely seen as an unjustified and aggressive trade attack. Economic fallout and the imperative for diversification. The ongoing trade instability is causing significant concern among business groups in both Canada and the U.S., who fear the long-term economic consequences of a prolonged dispute. In a powerful joint statement, the Chambers of Commerce from Ontario and Michigan, two jurisdictions that form one of the most vital trade corridors in North America, warned that the current prolonged instability could have devastating and lasting effects on key industries, including the automotive sector, advanced manufacturing, agriculture, and logistics. They went so far as to label the situation a North American competitiveness crisis and made an urgent appeal for both governments to de-escalate the conflict and return to the negotiating table. The integrated nature of these industries makes them particularly vulnerable to tariff disruptions, as supply chains that span the border are now facing new costs and logistical hurdles with every shipment. In response to these mounting concerns, Prime Minister Mark Carney outlined a comprehensive two-pronged national strategy. The first prong is a continued commitment to diplomatic efforts aimed at securing a fair and equitable trade deal. The second, and increasingly critical, prong involves focusing on providing targeted support to industries and workers most impacted by the tariffs, while simultaneously redoubling efforts to diversify Canada's trading partnerships with other global markets. This proactive approach, he argued, is designed to create well-paying domestic jobs and build greater economic resilience. This strategy has garnered widespread political support, including from conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who has expressed a willingness to collaborate with the government to secure a good deal for Canada. This broad political consensus underscores the seriousness of the situation and a shared national determination to safeguard Canada's economic future. The lack of a resolution has plunged many Canadian businesses into a state of precarious uncertainty. The CFIB noted that while they fully support the no deal is better than a bad deal philosophy, the prolonged absence of a resolution is forcing small firms to postpone critical business decisions and face an increasingly unpredictable future. This feeling of being caught in the crossfire was echoed by labor leaders like Marty Warren, National Director of the United Steelworkers Union, who asserted that while he was disappointed an agreement was not reached, the worst possible outcome would have been a deal that locked in permanent damage to our economy. This sentiment highlights the immense pressure on the Canadian government to navigate these complex negotiations with extreme caution and skill, balancing the urgent need for a resolution with the fundamental imperative of securing a truly beneficial and enduring agreement for all Canadians. The path forward remains fraught with uncertainty, but Canada's resolve to protect its economic interests appears to be stronger than ever.